Welcome to our discussion on a rather intriguing geopolitical twist, Trump's tariffs that backfired big time.
Right, it's fascinating how an attempt to isolate India ended up pushing it closer to China and inadvertently strengthening BRICS unity.
Exactly. So, the US government has been trying to recruit India for its new Cold War against China for years, but Trump's aggressive tariff policies, yeah, those really had unintended consequences.
Yeah, for sure. It's like instead of India acting as a counterbalance to China, it kind of flipped the script and moved closer to Beijing.
Absolutely. And the video we're looking at even highlights how these tariffs, instead of, browbeating India into siding with the US, ended up nudging it to build a better relationship with China.
That's right. And then you've got the broader picture where this move also reinforces the BRICS unity, bringing Brazil, Russia, India, China, and even later other emerging economies into a more, united front against traditional US policies.
Uh huh, exactly. It's like a geopolitical domino effect. One policy misstep, Trump's tariffs, leads to unintended realignment. And Ben Norton, the political economist we hear about here, lays out the complex history of US India China Russia relations in a really detailed way.
Yep, sure does. Norton dives into how the long-standing US ambitions in the region, especially trying to use India as a tool against China, backfired spectacularly.
Yeah, and it's not just about tariffs alone, it's also about overall contradictory policies. Trump's approach seems to have been like, do this aggressive move, but the response was not what was intended at all.
Right, I've seen that. It almost feels like, a strategic miscalculation where the US underestimated India's own economic and political aspirations.
Exactly. And to add another layer, the tariffs were partly high profile actions in a sort of showdown with, India. Yet, while the US hoped for alignment against China, it sparked a reaction where India began balancing its ties, including deepening economic ties with Chinese markets.
And that's where the BRICS connection kicks in, right? With India moving closer to China, the unity among these emerging powers grows even stronger, making it harder for the US to isolate any one of them.
Precisely. It's that interconnected network, BRICS countries, each wielding their own influence, that seriously complicates the US strategy. I mean, think about it. It's like trying to break up a well connected group when individual members are finding that they have more in common, especially in pushing back against US dominance.
Yep, that's spot on. However, I do wonder, isn't it a bit too simplistic to attribute all of this realignment purely to Trump's tariffs? I mean, other global economic factors have been at play.
That's a fair critique. While Trump's tariffs acted as a catalyst, there's also the underlying trend of emerging economies, like India, wanting to exercise more agency. It's not just a reaction against US policy, it's also about pursuing self interest and diversified partnerships.
I get that. Right, so this shift can also be seen as part of a longer trend where nations are increasingly seeking independence from the historic post-Dewey order dominated by the US and Europe.
Exactly. It's like a gradual realignment. If you recall, the talk even touches on how India's trade surplus with the US and increased energy deals with Russia further complicate the picture.
And then you have the role of rare earth exports and the strategic commodities battle, with China sometimes restricting exports to, retain leverage. This reinforces that emerging partnership dynamic even further.
Right, and these economic levers are incredibly important. Trump's strategy to use tariffs as a punitive measure ended up having a ripple effect on international supply chains and trade dynamics.
Very interesting. That ripple effect not only realigned trade relationships, but also signaled a broader reluctance among emerging economies to take lines imposed by Washington.
Yeah, it's like instead of India falling neatly into the US wedge, it's taking a more independent path, strengthening ties with China and, by extension, adding credibility and unity to the rest of BRICS.
Exactly. And there's a degree of irony here. The very policy intended to secure an alliance ends up reinforcing opposition. It's like backfire in the most dramatic sense.
Absolutely. The irony is palpable. And if we think about the broader strategic implications, this development could signal a shift where, instead of a polarized world dominated solely by US influence, we see more multipolarity emerging.
True, right? And while some may argue that India's growing relationship with China might be, lopsided due to historical tensions, the current economic imperatives seem to override that.
True enough, though I would add that there are internal contradictions within BRICS too. For example, even as these nations come together to counter US dominance, they have their own disputes and differences in approach.
Yeah, that's a valid point. Exactly, and that's where the conversation gets nuanced. BRICS unity, while significant, isn't an all encompassing alliance. It's more of a pragmatic grouping addressing shared interests rather than ideological alignment.
And coming back to Trump's action, it's a classic example of how short term aggressive policy tools like tariffs can have long lasting and unintended geopolitical consequences.
Right, exactly. And from a broader perspective, this situation also reminds me of how, in international relations, economic strategies and trade policies can sometimes be double edged swords. Sometimes they just empower your opposition rather than weaken them.
It's like trying to use an oversized hammer to crack a nut. In this case, the hammer simply shattered the expected alignment, leaving pockets of resistance that have now, well, evolved into something more formidable.
Truly. But I'm curious, do you think the US can recalibrate its strategy to, mitigate these kinds of backfires in the future?
That's a critical question. I mean, to some extent, recalibration is possible. However, it would require a shift from imposing unilateral measures to more, say, multilateral negotiations and genuine engagement with partner nations.
Definitely, yes. Right. Because building trust and long term partnerships is clearly more effective than stoking short term conflicts through aggressive tariffs.
Exactly. And history tells us that policies seen as overtly coercive often spur defensive realignments. In this case, India's pivot to China wasn't just reactionary, it was in many ways a strategic realignment in line with its own interests.
That makes sense. And then, of course, there's the role of domestic politics. I mean, India's leadership under Narendra Modi, along with its economic aspirations, has been steering this independent course for a while now.
Right, exactly. Modi's government has been quite assertive and pragmatic in balancing relationships. So while the tariffs might have been intended to pull India closer to the US, they inadvertently underlined India's commitment to its diversified foreign
Absolutely.
policy.
It's really a lesson in how policy must, account for the agency and strategic depth of other players in the international arena. There's no one size fits all in geopolitics, eh?
Spot on. And that's the takeaway here. Aggressive tariff measures without considering the broader historical, economic, and political context can really lead to, well, unexpected alliances that shift the
I
global
agree.
balance.
And while Trump's policies were bold in a way, they also serve as a cautionary tale about the complexities of international diplomacy in our interconnected world.
Definitely. It shows that in geopolitics, every move has a ripple effect, and sometimes the ripples turn into waves, even waves that consolidate like BRICS unity in opposition to old strategies.
Exactly. Well, this discussion really underscores the need for nuanced, well thought out policies in international relations. Thanks for diving into these intricate details. It's been really enlightening.
My pleasure. It's always great to explore how these strategic policy moves ripple out and shape our world. Until next time, let's keep questioning and understanding the dynamics behind the headlines.